Hey everyone, I'm Lawrence Sam from lawrencesam.com, and in the light of the things that are happening around the world, I just felt like we needed to have this conversation. This conversation in just being a human being, we need to have this conversation. But more importantly, I think this also is not being heard in the chiropractic profession, which is the profession that I'm in. And I think this is such an important conversation to have because we don't know sometimes what to say. We don't know what to do and how to act with all of this stuff about what Black Lives Matter means. And I think people are getting a lot of mixed information. And I wanted to kind of do this particular episode simply for the fact I wanted to have a voice. I wanted to provide people's voices of the people that it matters to. And for me, in my last video one of the videos that I did, I talked about I wanted to be a listener. I wanted to be someone to learn. I want to learn from the experiences because I don't know. And I want to look at my own personal biases and I want to kind of question that. So I'm asking you to watch this entirety to really open up your mind, not to be confrontational, but to just listen. Be a great listener because I think that's what the world needs right now. So without further ado, let's get on with the show. So welcome to this particular episode. And in order for this episode to work, I had to call in some friends from across the world, people I've known for a very long time. And let me just kind of introduce to everyone. So I'll start, well, it depends on how the video is done, but to my left, that's Sophie McDermott. Sophie is a practicing chiropractor in the UK. Underneath me is Dean Blackstock. He's also a great chiropractor in the UK as well, representing there. And Dr. Shara, is a Canadian, a fellow Canadian. She was we went to the same school a couple of years apart, and now she practices in Singapore. So I felt like this would represent the whole profession, males and females across the globe in 4 countries and at least 3 continents. Four continents.
We've done it.
Yeah, exactly. So guys, welcome aboard. I really appreciate you guys taking a time. As I did the intro there, I really wanted to the whole point of this is that I think what we need is for me to talk less and for me to be a listener. And it's a challenging time for all of us, but more importantly, it has been challenging times for all of you. Sure. So what I would love for you, we have a platform. I think the leaders need to provide that platform to have those voices being heard and to actually really understand what is actually going on. So I'm going to start with the first question is that, can you give your personal experience, what your personal thoughts with what's going on right now? What are the challenges that you're seeing? Like, what are the first instinct? What are the emotions that you're feeling now that it's been going on for a couple of weeks since the George Floyd incidents, the protests all around the world? I mean, I've never seen anything like this in terms of the world coming together on this, other than COVID, right? And then after COVID, and it's like this other thing, and we're all kind of coming together. But there's a lot of tension. There's a lot of tension on both sides, and I feel like the message is so important to continue on this conversation. That's the thing I want to kind of start with. So Sophie, I'm going to start with you. Tell me your thoughts around this and where your emotions have been.
If I'm honest, very mixed and very up and down and very emotional, to be honest. And I didn't actually realize that what has happened would affect me to this extent. I think it's forced us all to take a step back and really look at ourselves, which is scary to do at the best of times. And in doing that, I've looked at myself as well and realized that perhaps the way I've judged people isn't right either. And that's people who look exactly the same as me. So, in terms of my background, as you said, I'm in the UK and I grew up in a predominantly white area. And although my family are black on one side, the other side is white, and they're who I was really around. And so I actually have realized myself that even me and the way I have judged other black people in the past is not right. So I can only imagine how perhaps other people are feeling. And I suppose it's really shocked me though, because it's brought up this debate, which definitely needs to be had. We need to be having this conversation, which is great. But even at points, I have felt like, can I speak up? Should I say anything? Should I just be quiet? I don't want to start getting into arguments with people I know, my friends. And it's been really hard. It's actually been a really, really tough time. And yeah, I don't know if anyone else has felt like that, but I have found it really
without
hard.
a doubt.
Totally.
Yeah. Dean, what do you
100%.
add to that?
Really just echoing the same feelings as Sophie just mentioned. It's been such a roller coaster from the initial incident, and even before then with some of the other incidents that unfortunately took place. There's anger at the start because you're tired of seeing it happening again and again. And then there's a frustration that, you know, in this day and age, it's 2020 and we're still having the same conversations. I remember growing up and seeing Rodney King and the riots and stuff that happened there, and you think, hold a minute, this is kind of familiar. I'm glad that we've got some momentum, but this hasn't gone away in 30 years. So there was a lot of frustration and anger and stuff at the start. And then being in the UK and seeing what's happening to your fellow kind of brothers and sisters and stuff across the pond, I did feel really helpless, and I rarely cry. But yeah, one day I was just like, I just can't take this anymore. So it's been a whole roller coaster of different emotions. Now I'm at the point where, like you say, we've been given an opportunity, I think, with social media and with the world that we live in now. It's been brought to everybody's attention, and we now have an opportunity to try and facilitate some change. So I'm ever the optimist. I'm feeling like this feels different than it did before. And like you say, if we can keep that momentum going, hopefully we can make some lasting change. But it's been 2 weeks or however long it's been now of just like this up and down weird. I don't know how to feel today. I feel elated. I feel like I can make a difference. I feel like I'm helpless. I feel like I can't do anything. I'm frustrated. But there feels like there's some light at the end of the tunnel. So yeah. You got me on a good day, Lawrence. That's all right.
Well, that's good. That's good. Sharon, maybe just continue that conversation and how you feel, but maybe just add to that in terms of what is the message that you feel personally that needs to continue?
Oh, wow. Loaded question. So perspective wise, I've got three minds because similar to Sophie, half of my family is Caucasian. I grew up with that part of my family. I didn't even know my Black family until through Facebook. I was in university. I found brothers through Facebook. It was crazy. And so in my community, there was 3 Black people out of 400,000 people in Canada. And the dilemma with Canada is it's very polite to the point where, there's no racism. Everything's fine. You're fine. So the undercurrent is still there. It's like I had to prepare as a 7-year-old. My grandmother lived in a community where the KKK was still present, and we had to be prepared to go visit her for the summer and how to deal with that. Right. And then I was in 93, I was in California when the Rodney King riots came. I was undergrad there, and I remember living through that. And with Sophie, I feel that same struggle because I wasn't Black enough to have a voice. It was like, you're from Canada. What do you know? Who are you? Why do you even get to say anything? And then in Canada, you're not white enough not to just shut up and say nothing. It's kind of stuck in the middle. And ironically, moving to Asia has been a completely different perspective. It's open, it's blunt, and it's hierarchy based on class. Right. And if you look at the Indian system, it depends on how light your skin is as to how important you are. And it's there. It's not a question. They don't call it racism. It's a part of their culture. Right. Yeah. And so being here, ironically, telling my landlords I was a Black American doctor from Canada was a plus because they thought I was Indian. So now they're putting me on a different hierarchy. Right. So, and everything is just open here. It's not that it's not here. It's just part of life. So it took out the emotional charge and it let me see it from a different perspective. Not that it's any more right at all, but it was just kind of completely new eyes. They didn't know who Rosa Parks was. So when she died and was in the paper, I had to explain her. And then, Asians look at her and think, well, she's not Black because their reference is Nigerians. right? So then you have to explain the whole Caribbean community. Like now I'm representing a whole community across the world.
Yeah. There's also different Asians too, right? They should know better.
Exactly. And so when this came out, I was quiet for a long time. I don't know if I'm allowed to have a voice sometimes. And I shared a little bit of my story on Facebook, and everyone was positive and had solidarity messages. And it was interesting. I felt it almost wasn't positive, like, oh, we stand with you. We didn't know our white privilege. We didn't. And I appreciate that, but that wasn't why I was sharing.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, that kind of stirred up a different style of emotion that I wasn't expecting. Yeah.
I heard something today. I can't remember who I wish I can reference her, but she was talking about being an ally. But being an ally in this, it's not a noun, it's a verb. And I thought it was really interesting, because there's a lot of us, we're just like, yeah, no, I'm here for you, brother or sister, like an ally. We're just there. But what she was saying is that what they need is being an ally, like ally with us, in a sense that they need, it's a verb, it's an action thing, which means you got to continue. And this is why I feel so compelled to kind of have this conversation right now. Because of our profession, like, let's face it, like we were just talking before, like every time we walk into a chiropractic conference anywhere in the world, like we are the minority, like by far, not even, a little bit, but like it's well documented. And what I'd love to kind of talk about with you guys, do you guys have any personal stories, like within yourself, personal experiences that we can possibly, as listeners or people watching this, can get a sense of maybe what it is like to be in your shoes?
As a chiropractor, or in life in general?
Just life in general, either professionally or being Black, and also, or just even in society. Like, is it, because I think one of the challenges for us is, and what I mean by us is that people who are non-Black, we are often, we can empathize. But what I feel like the challenges for, and I'm just admitting for myself, is that I can kind of understand, but I don't really know. Right? I don't know the little those little things that, because I can't, until I put myself into your shoes, right? And actually walk in your shoes. And I don't have that perspective. And what I feel like a lot of people sort of need is to kind of, they can see that, oh, there is some differences, but they don't really know until you actually experience it. Right? It's almost like a chiropractor or a patient, right? Patient can go, I get what you guys do. You guys crack spines, right? But you don't really know what an adjustment feels like until you actually experience what a chiropractic adjustment feels like. You can kind of see it from the outside, but you don't feel an adjustment until you actually go through it and change. And so that's what I was referring to, is like, is there any experiences, personal experiences, that maybe when you're younger, or even in the profession, that may have highlighted some of the challenges that any of you have gone through?
Oh man, so I'll let ladies go first.
Thanks, Dean.
Okay, I can see. You're welcome.
Really. It's a tough one.
Welcome.
From my perspective, I think it's more like, it's like the little things. I think, obviously what's happened is obviously so sad, and we've all seen it. Most people have watched it. But that's obviously the extreme. And I think people think it's only that which is the problem. And I don't think they realise that there's a level of racism, actually, which we are instilling even into our kids, is what I believe, without us even realising that we're doing it. It's that deep rooted. You've only got to look at people who are, highly successful. A lot of CEOs, they're predominantly white. And so where are the role models for kids growing up? And I know, as I said, with everything which has happened, it's made me look at myself. And I've realised, even as a kid, that I have judged other Black people.
Yeah.
So if I was out walking, saw a Black boy, automatically I'd start to think thoughts of, oh, should I cross the road? Like, is he gonna steal my purse? And I think this is what we need to realize, that these people, which are myself, are being targeted on a daily basis. And it's those small little ways in which we act, which perhaps we don't even realize we're doing, they're subconscious, how it's really affecting that person. So, the only reference I can think of is, when I was a kid at school, people would always go on about my hair because it's just an obsession, isn't it? When you're black, your hair. And my mum would get it braided because she couldn't deal with it. And all the time, everybody, can I touch your hair? Oh my God, can I touch, oh, your hair, your hair, your hair. And to me, it was just like, what's the fascination? Like, it's just hair. You've got hair on your head. You had your hair cut the other day. I wasn't asking to touch your hair. And one day I remember we'd come back from summer holidays and I had my hair braided, and it was braided with extensions in, so with fake hair, and it was like a red colour. And our school, it was a Catholic school I went to, they put me in effectively segregation for the day. I wasn't allowed to go into any of my classes my first day back at school in September because of my hair. And like thinking about it, actually now, like this is only, maybe we're talking, I'm trying to think how old I was. So about 15 years ago.
Wow.
To think that was even possible. And, you know, as a kid, I couldn't even get it. I didn't even really understand. It's like, well, why am I not allowed to go to my class today just because of my hair?
Yeah.
And apparently, you know, the reason for it was setting a bad example that anyone can come in with different colour hair if they wanted to. I mean, it's crazy, isn't it? I can't even believe this is a story, right? And that night, my mum had to take all my hair out.
Oh, wow.
So I could go back to school the next day.
Yeah.
Wow.
Dean's
and
never
to
had
think that, as, you know, I was treated like that as a kid. And so no wonder I have a bit of that inside me where I think I need to fit in. What are white people doing? I need to do what they're doing.
Yeah. Interesting.
You know?
It's very subtle,
that's
isn't it?
That's a good point. Yeah. And that's such a good point. And the hair thing, hair for me has always been like an expression of my, like part of my personality. Yeah. So I've changed my hair like a lot over the years. So even now as like a grown man, what am I now? No, what was it? June. So I changed it this year. Last year I had a big afro. 38-year-old man, patient's coming in. Can I please touch your hair? You think, I don't, seriously? Okay, fine. Do you know what? Go on, just get stuck in. And like you say, it's been something which when I was at university, I used to have dreadlocks. You know, so going through university, I was aware that coming out and then going into a professional job in the medical profession, I might have to change how I look to fit in a little bit easier, because that might be something that puts me on the back foot. And I think growing up, that was always something which, you know, my parents had experienced and told me about at work. My dad had worked for BT for a number of years, and he distinctly remembers on a number of occasions, you know, bosses saying, listen, if you were just a different color, you probably would have got that promotion. You know, it was over. It was like, if you weren't black, you probably would have got the job. But unfortunately, that's just the way the system works. So I was very aware how I looked would have an effect on potentially what other people thought. Now, that's just human nature, but it's something which, you know, my white counterparts never really gave any thought. You know, if I want to have a beard, I have a beard. If I want to shave my hair, I'll shave my hair. For me, I was very aware about how I looked. How can I maybe be a bit more subtle so that it's not, you know, you stand out enough, right? 6 foot black guy with dreads is bad enough, let alone everything else. So, it's one of those things in the media. They play a strong part with our image as black people. So, you know, that's something which we're now talking about. It's like, well, how are black people represented in the media? And is that something that we maybe need to look at in terms of representing ourselves better in a way that's not so, so we say aggressive? Because like you say, you see a black guy walking down the street, first instinct is you're going to do something to me. We're not all like that, you know? But that's something which the media can play a really strong part in helping to change that narrative.
You know, it's going back to the media portraying, like I remember, and this is just very recent. So I know I'm going to use my experience and to make some sense and some context. Like I remember when Black Panther came out just maybe 2 years ago, and you know, the black community embraced it and loved it, and just you know, like saying like finally, you know, an all black cast, and I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. Like I remember saying like, yeah, that's awesome, but I didn't fully get it. Okay, like I got it from like, oh, intellectually, like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Until I saw Crazy Rich Asian. So here's the thing, right? When I saw Crazy Rich Asian and I saw it, and I went to the theaters, I went with my wife and I saw it, and I'm like, it hit me hard. I just like, it hit me so hard. And I'm like,
Mm.
I really get it now. Like, I get it from your perspective, because I didn't realize I lived 3 years of my life at that time, or 44 years of my life, and not really having a figure like that we can see on media, on TV or movie, that's represented of the thing. I didn't think that was a big deal, but it was a big deal 43 years later. Like, the only Chinese guy that you ever see is like, you know, he's a martial art ninja, Bruce Lee style, right? Jackie Chan, right? That's the, there's never been a Asian male lead that's sexy and handsome, you know, right? Like, it's, and so I got at that point when I saw that movie, it's like, I got the perspective of what Black Panther meant to the Black community, and what the Crazy Rich Asians meant to the Asian community. And that's the media that's portrayed, right? And that's what's missing. And I think our, you know, I can hope I can say this, but like we actually, what's funny is that all of us have mixed kids, right? You know,
we do.
Yeah. So like Sophie and Shara and myself, I have, you know, white partners, and Dean, you're married to an Indian.
So her dad's Indian and her mum's white English. Yeah.
Right. So like, we all have mixed kids, and I think about our kids, the next generation, and how do you guys see that? Like, for your kids, like, what do you, how, like, with this here, like, does it change, or even before this, like, does it change in any context of what you teach your kids, or how to see the world differently? Like, what's your experience in raising kids? We all got very similar age kids. How has that experience gone for you?
I found it interesting because my kids are all shades. Like, they don't even look like each other. And so, speaking of hair, like, my poor son,
he's blonde.
Being in Singapore,
blonde, right?
I have 2 blonde and 2 with brown afros, right? But the elder one has a dark afro, and the tourists here predominantly from China, but they're no shame, right? And it's all about touching, not even asking permission. And I remember we were at the Ritz-Carlton in the lift, and he was 3, and he was just like doing this. He's like, no, you can't touch till this afternoon. Like, don't touch me now. You know, like, he was making appointments with them because he had had enough. Right. And they don't ask. And he got, you know, we gave him permission to say, no, you're not allowed to take a picture unless you ask my mommy or my auntie, or, you know, you're not allowed unless you ask me. That's not polite. You know, like, we gave him that permission because he was feeling that stress. And his best friend as a neighbor is a boy from New Delhi, and he very quickly realized, well, how come my skin's not as dark as Kabir's? And so those conversations started early. And then when his brother came, well, that's a whole host of another can of worms, because they're different skins. So they themselves are trying to say, well, I'm daddy's son and I'm mommy's son, because I look like them, you know. And we took a glass of water with different food coloring and mixed equal parts. And we said, look, you guys have all of those same parts. It's just that it's different colors that come out. And we showed them under the sun how different colors show at different times.
Nice.
But that kind of conversation started early because they looked that different from each other. So when my last baby was born, who's blonde afro, blue eyes, I mean, the second son was in love. He's like, well, he's my best friend because he looks like me.
Wow. Tell me about like, in this situation right now, I think a lot of people don't know what to say. They don't know what's appropriate. They don't know how to help, or even like to really think during the street. They know the emotions they have, but they're not sure what to do. And one of the things I challenge people to do, like what I'm challenging myself to do, is to like be aware of my personal bias. Sophie, you kind of mentioned that you're in yourself. And so thanks for sharing that. Like, just looking at our own personal bias. And like, what are your thoughts around that? Like, do you think that's a great idea to make sure we start to look at that? Because, you know, what are your opinions and thoughts around that?
I think we all need to just be working on ourselves. I mean, we're in a great time in the sense of, you know, what you were saying, Dean, we've got social media, there's amazing programs on Netflix as well. We need to use this time to educate ourselves. And I think also that's perhaps which is being missed. People are focusing so much on the protests, the riots, but actually, you know, this all starts at home with each of us, and we need to be taking that time to learn more and, you know, teach our kids as well, as you said, because if anything, this is highlighted for me. I'm scared for Josh. What's going to happen, my son? You know, when he grows up, how is he going to be judged? And again, it's that bias of, I don't have those feelings of being scared for my daughter. She looks quite white anyway. What you were saying, Shara, I've got one of each as well. But also she's a woman, and unfortunately it's black men who get judged. As I've said, I've had that bias myself, so we need to be educating ourselves for sure.
Yeah,
I think that's such a good point about the education, because that's how we together as a community, both like the black community, but all other communities, as human beings. I don't know much about the for example, let's say the Chinese culture. Now, if I was moving to China, I would take it upon myself to learn about the culture, the history, and all that kind of stuff. And I think what makes Britain really interesting is we're very, very multicultural. But I've certainly found, I'm in rural Kent, so there's a lot of Indians in the community, which is great because I'm married, an Indian, so that's awesome. But there's still, pockets of people living in their own little lives. And I think that's sometimes because of the lack of education. And I hate using the word ignorance because it's not ignorance deliberate, but you just don't know what you don't know. And I think if we don't take the time to find out, this is where sometimes we have these frictions coming together, because now you've got clashes of misunderstanding. And that's what I think, as a black guy looking at the movement that's starting to create, is I hope that doesn't get lost in the sense of what is put out is, they're rioting and they're looting and they're doing this. Like, people are going to do that regardless. People are there to protest, and they're protesting for a reason, because the system that they are in isn't working for them. And I think as human beings, if we're all going to live together, we have to try and make it as fair as we can. But it's through understanding about what other people want and need, and what they need to be changed for them. That's where we can make some real lasting change. So the education side, I think, is so important.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, and experience. So like being in Canada, which is touted as multiculturalism, and Toronto is supposed to be this massive multicultural city. I lived there 5 years. Everyone has their own town. Greek town, little India, right? Like they're not actually assimilated as much. And I faced as much open racism there as I did anywhere else in Canada. And in Singapore, it's decreed by law that every building has a percentage of Indian, Chinese, and Malay. It's like when Lee Kuan Yew put this country together, he made them assimilate because he saw gangs and riots, right? But I see my own biases as well. Like if I go to Target or Walmart in the States, you bet I'm dressing up, I'm putting on makeup, because I don't want to be looked at. I don't want to be stopped. I don't want to be followed through the store because they think I'm going to steal something, right? So you already have your own way of protection, not only bias against others, but of how you have to portray yourself, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we have such a high education. So in a way, that puts us on a different level than other people in our community. And it's easy to think, oh, well, I'm educated. I'm not better, but I'm here. I'm not that kind of, like Sophie said, I'm not that kind of black person, right? So it's working with that kind of thought process as well.
Yeah. Interesting. One of the challenges I think, that we kind of tended to go through during this period of time is that, like you said, Sophie, I think it's that we're picking out the wrong things to kind of talk about sometimes. And I think the message, what Dean, you were saying, that it gets lost. And this is where my frustration kind of lies, because the media and also people pick apart the problem. They pick apart like, oh, George Floyd he's a criminal, or he was bad, and so therefore he shouldn't be a martyr. Like, what? That's not the point, right? That's we're like what about Breonna Taylor? Like, what about like all those other people? Like, we're trying to like nitpick these things, and like you said, we pick on the rioters. I'm like, yeah. But what about the hundreds of thousands of people who are actually peaceful and protesting? Right. What's the point? And the reason, one of the things I want to continue this conversation and have this is because I want people to just I'm hoping that people have a chance to listen and to really just learn, because I'm freaking learning. Like I've been watching movies, like just trying to understand. And because I did, last year I got an opportunity to go into maximum security prison in LA. And that was an experience and a half. Like, I mean, because like I'm as clean as I can get, right? As in sense of like never done anything wrong in my life. I'm like, I'm gonna be thrown into this situation, and I'm like, and the first thing I seen, like, these guys are. It was I think it was a class 3 maximum security or class 4. So like, it's one of the top tiers. And these are, you know,
Wow.
people who have committed murders, first degree murders, and these are people most likely will never get out. But man, the first time we got in there, like, they were hugging us and they're high-fiving us. And it was like, oh, okay, that's not what I expected, right? That's not what I portrayed in the movies. And we spent a whole entire day, you know, and one of the most powerful exercise that we did was something called Step to the Line. And Step to the Line was that they had the inmates on one side and they had all the entrepreneurs on one side. It was about 120 of them and 100 of us, I think, on one side. And we had a line that we could step in. And then basically we stepped back from the line, and then she would start asking questions, you know, some easy ones, you know, like, you know, have you ever, you know, cheated on a test or whatever? Like, we all kind of stepped towards the line if you said yes. And then they start getting harder. The questions were like, you know, who grew up with a single, you know, parent home? You know, who grew up with no parents? Who, you know, who had a brother or sister or close friend die before age of 18? You know, who grew up in a you know, family where there was drugs, or, you know, like little things like that. And man, like, there was even to the point of like, what time was your first time you were arrested? 18. One guy was arrested when he was 6 years old, you know, and you're like, and the perspective of that was going, you know what? I don't know what it's like. They made choices, but man, if I was in those shoes, if I was living in that environment, I grew up and that's all I knew, would I be making a different choice even with, you know, what I know now? I don't know, because that's just you think my moral compass would say, yes, I would make that the right choice. But given the circumstances and you know any other better, I'm not sure. And so I think it's such an important aspect for all of us to really kind of dive in and just to question, because it's easy for a lot of people to say, well, I'm not a racist, so therefore, like, I'm good. What do you say to that? Because I think there's definitely needs to be said of that. There needs to have conversation. Just because you're not a racist, I think there needs to be still more done. Because it's easy. The reason I'm saying this is uncomfortable for me, right? It's uncomfortable to have these conversations. It's uncomfortable because I could easily have stepped back and go, you know what? No, I'm not touching this. I'll just wait until this kind of just goes by, give it a couple of weeks, and then, you know, then we'll go back to normal programming, right?
Yeah.
But that's not right. I don't feel right about that, you know, and I feel like there has to be a conversation here to say, like, no, this is the time that we need to kind of speak and have those uncomfortable conversations with ourselves, and with people. Like, I've had conversations with my wife, you know, just to talk it through, because I don't know. I don't understand. That's what I'm trying to figure out. So I don't know if you have any comments on that.
Oh man, it's such a tricky one. I think because we're at the start of what feels like is real change. I hope anyway that's going to be happening. So to know how this is all going to pan out, nobody knows how it's all going to pan out. And I think having the discussion is probably a very, very good start, because it's in those discussions that we can come to some solutions. You know, I've had people, I mean, straight away, it's like, you know, Dean, what do you think about the Black Lives Matter thing? Okay, so I'll give my opinion. But don't you think all lives matter? I'm like, yeah, of course, all lives do matter. Don't get me wrong. I'm a black guy, and I'd never really given this much thought until it was kind of thrust into the limelight. Because for me, growing up in Kent, I drive a nice car, I've got a wife and 3 kids, I'm comfortable. It doesn't affect me. So you just carry on about your business, right? Now it's in my face again. I'm like, I can't help now, but do something about this. So I was the same as a lot of people. It's like, I don't know what to do, because I mean, if it doesn't really affect me, I'm not living in an inner city. I don't, you know, I had both parents growing up. I was very, very fortunate. So I think looking at how we are right now as a society, having the discussion about the system that we are in and that we're going to be raising our kids in means that if we can get this right, we can make some change that's going to benefit everybody. Now, it's also, as you said as well, Sarah, it's class as well as race, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people in the Black community are in the lower classes in our society. So we've got to look about how do we start to address those kind of things. It's education, it's schooling, it's other bits and pieces. Okay, fine. I, as a Black guy, have been pulled over, but I don't get pulled over all the time because I'm not in London or like in Brixton or in Hackney, where, you know, the profiling is so strong. It's like, if I was in London, I'd be pulled over probably every 10 minutes. you know.
Right.
But
Wow.
living out here in the suburbs, it's like, you know, it's, for me as a black guy, it's comfortable. So we've got to look at, you know, our society and how that's structured, because, you know, the lowest people in society are the ones that hit hardest. We hit hardest with COVID, and it's like black and Asian, the BAME community are hit hardest because they're in communities where, you know, it's not the same as, you know, Kensington, right? But you can go half a mile down the road and it's very, very different. So I think that's probably when, you know, my white counterparts just said, well, how can I help? It's like, listen, if you see something, call it out. You know, before you may have just turned a blind eye to it. If you think, you know what, that isn't right, just call it out. And then also have a look around and just see how society is. Where can you make a difference? It doesn't have to be massive, but there are things that we can do for our community that benefit everybody. And I think if we can do that, we benefit everybody. The rising tide raises all ships. Everybody benefits, whether you're black, Chinese, Asian, Mexican, whatever. And I think that's a really, really good place to start.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that idea too of when people say, what can I do? Ideally, you're giving, so how do I explain this? I always saw my role, because my mom's Caucasian and she was a single mom, she never gave us using color as an excuse. Like that was never discussed in our house, full stop. There's no excuse. You excel or you don't, but there's no excuse. Yeah. And so her mentality was, don't care what they already think of your quote kind, make them think differently by having an experience with you. And what that was amazing for me is, and although very irritating, is I commonly get that comment, oh, wow, well, you're not really black, or I don't even think of you as black because you're not like those other people. And good and bad, but you've given that window and that door that's open to someone who may never have experienced our community because they've had that experience with you. And in turn, I would say do the same for the black community. So if you're Asian, Caucasian, whatever, make an interaction, because there's people in the black community who will not speak to people outside of it now because they're scared. They're worried about judgment, fear, and all these other things. Let them have experiences with people that show them they can be supported and loved with the greater whole.
Yeah. Awesome. Love that.
Yeah, that's great. Sophie, do you have anything to add to that, or?
Well, very much just, you know, similar to what you're saying, really. And I think we need to realize, you know, this is a problem across the world as well, because a lot of comments I've heard is, well, that's only in America because the police are so brutal and they all just walk around with guns. Like, this is definitely a problem everywhere, you know, the UK included. And there needs to be more integration. And, you know, you've only got to look at certain areas of the UK, like where my husband's from, whenever I go up there. I mean, I stand out like a sore thumb, let's put it that way. And I feel that as well, you know. But just the same as there's areas in London, like you said, Dean, like Brixton, Hackney, like, then it's the opposite, isn't it? And, you know, until these communities like that, where there's that poverty, where that it can be tackled, where they can get the education they need, where they can have some role models to look up to, only then is it really going to change, I feel personally. Because, you know, with my mum is black, so she said, you know, she didn't really make colour a thing as we grew up, not at all. But there was definitely that underlying theme of, I need to do even better. And I think until black people are stepping 100%. Up to that, rather than thinking to themselves, well, I'm black, that's it, I'm done, and just going down the wrong path, then it's not really going to change. And I think, you know, it's important we're having these conversations, and that, you know, everyone comes together now to support people. Because what you were saying, Lawrence, about everyone saying, you know, all lives matter, that just really bugs me. I saw a great thing about, someone said, you know, okay, when we do Race for Life for breast cancer, we shouldn't be doing that anymore then, because all cancers matter, not just breast cancer. And it's exactly the same thing. So there's always going to be different opinions, and I appreciate that. We can't all think the same, of course not. But on this, we do need to, hopefully we can come together and make some sort of change.
Yeah, and that's such a touching point. You know, this is what I mean, like shifting focus, and, you know, that Black Lives Matter. Like, I mean, I'll fully admit, like, the first response that I had when I first heard that maybe a couple of years ago, I was like, no, all lives matter. Until I was like, when someone actually, I don't know if they pulled me up on it, or I remember reading something, I'm like, oh, I've been wrong. Like I've been wrong totally. And I had to dig in, and I tried to explain that to my wife, and she's like, I don't get it. And then I'm like, oh, maybe I didn't explain that. So then I had to dig deeper. And then like, I still explained the second time. She goes, I still don't get it. I had to dig deeper again. Like it took me like 3 days of like, just like really kind of showing different examples, because I got it, but I couldn't explain it. I couldn't get that message across. And it took me several contexts, you know, images and understandings, and to, you know, to really kind of show that understanding, like, oh, that makes sense. You know, like there was one that was like, you know, it just, there's so many different ways to explain it. But the All Blacks Matter is the All Lives Matter and the Black Lives Matter is such a controversial thing, but yet it's not controversial. Like if you really truly understand it, right? It's not like it just came up just this year. Like it's been around for like 2013. Like it's, you know, I think from my research, it's been around for a very long time. And then people start questioning the movement and stuff. Like we're losing focus again on the message. What's the message we're saying? Like we need to kind of be better human beings. I think that's number one. We need to, and I think that self-reflection that I've been trying to have, and I'm trying to see, like, I'm trying to remove those biases. So when I see someone, like no matter what race or, you know, class we talked about, is I want to just remove the initial instinct to judge. Like that's the thing. I think if we can do that, I think we can, you know, move in a better way, because oftentimes people, the conversation I'm having with certain people, they just don't want to question the reality. They think everything's good. So then they create confirmation bias to judge, like, no, everything, I'm good. Like I live a great life. I'm a good human being. So no, like I'm continue. I don't need to worry about this stuff. And I think that's the problem, right? That's the problem. It's like thinking that your life is good, so therefore everything's okay. And that was when I got pulled up, you know, a couple of weeks ago when I first saw that. Like something in me just felt like, no, doesn't feel right, because that's what I would usually do. I would just ignore the news. I'm like, yeah, that happened. It's terrible. Next news cycle. Oh, that's terrible. Next news cycle. But something in this was like, no, like if I don't say something, if I don't do something, if I don't change, even with me, just if that's the only thing that changed, and this is going to just continue to happen. And like you said, Dean, like, you know, Rodney King, like that was 29, 30 years ago. I still remember that. We're still having the same conversation, and our kids are going to grow up in the same environment. And that's not what we would want. And I think this is why everybody's sort of speaking up.
Yeah, definitely.
Is there any parting words? Like, would you, like, let's talk about from our profession. What would you like our fellow colleagues to get out of this, if any? You know, and we kind of had this conversation right at the beginning. It was like, should we do this as a professional thing, or should we keep this like non-professional? I don't know. I know that people are watching this, who will be watching this, are not just chiropractors, because this conversation isn't just about chiropractic. However, there are fellow colleagues in our profession. Like, is there something that you would like to say, or for us to consider or think about in our profession?
I think maybe just having more awareness of who should I say is representing our profession. And I'm not saying that is our profession's fault by any means. But I think just to have that awareness of, you know, when you go to a conference, when you go to a seminar, you know, who are those people standing on stage talking? And we've started to change the conversation quite recently within chiropractic in terms of more women being represented. And we're starting to see that a lot more. And I think that's absolutely fantastic. Perhaps now it's time for us to start look at other minorities as well, just the same way as we did with highlighting how women were so underrepresented, can't get my words out, you know what I mean. So yeah, I think just to bring that awareness to our profession. I mean, I've seen on online a lot of chiropractors saying, well, crazy things really about how this isn't a problem in our profession, but it is, because we need to think, who's going to take our shoes when we're no longer doing it? Is it just going to be the same over and over and over? Because if it is, we're not progressing, are we? So yeah, and I think that's why, you know, because there is a lack of not just Black people, all different, you know, ethnicities being represented within chiropractic, I think it's actually now down to us to actually be those people to step up, because until we take any action and do that, there's not going to be a change.
Absolutely.
Yeah, 100% agree. 100% agree. I think the status quo is always happy with the way things are because it suits the vast majority, and that's through no fault of the profession. You know, we're here in the UK where just over three quarters, probably a bit more now, of the population are white. So of course it's going to be potentially a white dominated industry. But I think as a black guy, and this is something which, like you say about reflection, I had never given it any thought. What role can I play? Because sometimes it's easy to say, well, what are the profession going to do? It's like the profession will do what the profession's always done because it's worked for them. Why would they bother changing it? What can I do? You know, I've never thought about going to an inner city school and saying how great chiropractic is.
Yeah.
Never. You know, up until now. And it's through having conversations like we're having and stuff that conversations I've had with colleagues where it's like, maybe that's something I should do. If they don't know about it, whose fault is it?
Yeah.
I'm a black guy in the profession. Can I play my part? Of course I can.
Yeah.
Could the profession do their part? Of course they can. But sometimes it's a case of we're the soldiers on the ground, as it were. We need to get our hands dirty. We need to go out and get some stuff done. And it's through that we can build some more momentum. And then you bring the bodies and governing bodies behind you and they help support you in that. But I think sometimes it's easy to put it at the foot of the UCA or the BCA or whatever chiropractic association and say, what are you guys going to do about it? It's like, okay, guys, we'll maybe get a committee and we'll think about it. And then 5 years later, nothing's ever happened. And it's like, you know, they will do what organizations do, which is if it works, we'll keep it. If it suits us, why bother changing it? You know, so if you agree, we've got a part to play.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, I actually see it as the profession, you know, if we want to bring it back to chiropractic, I see that, you know, we've been talking about race and we talking about, you know, males and females and we also talked about classes. But I think in chiropractic, we have a big problem that we just don't freely admit it. I think the problem is that we just have different philosophies and yet we do exactly the same type of hatred, type of like languaging and, you know, not listening to other sides. And so, and that creates this divide that we have in this profession. I'm not suggesting we need to like, you know, come all together and be happy about it, but I'm just saying, I think I believe anyways, is my personal belief. So I'm not putting any words in anybody's mouth, but I believe that needs to be some sort of common ground, some sort of at least respect for both sides of the equation. And because there's validity for both. And just because I may not necessarily agree or someone else may not necessarily agree with the style or technique or the way of thinking about chiropractic doesn't mean they don't have any value in this community, being a chiropractor. And so it's the same type of thing, but just in a different context. And so, you know, chiropractors may say, well, this doesn't affect us. No, it does affect us because that's the thing. If we're not aware of our own personal biases in those circumstances, that's exactly what we're doing. And this is exactly what the same kind of conversation we're talking about. It's just not race, not minority, not class. We're just talking about from philosophy. It's the same thing, this constant hatred. And this is the thing that we need to try to pull away and be aware of the conversations we're having. Instead of hating the other side, is how can we listen to the other side and just understand from their perspective and just be professional to disagree, but yet we can still have a drink and still have a dinner and still be respectful. You know, that's the thing that I think needs to happen in our profession, in my opinion. Guys, I want to say thank you. Thank you for accepting the invitation. I know I didn't give you much lead, so just to let everybody know, I just said, hey, I'm going to go on this call webinar and record this, which you want to come on. So I had no clue what we're going to talk about. So they couldn't prepare for anything. But I really do appreciate your time. And I appreciate your time, but more importantly, I appreciate your honesty. I appreciate your honesty and also your courage to be able to step up and to be able to talk about matters that is very sensitive at this time, but it's such an important thing. And it takes leaders like yourself to be able to have this type of conversation, and leaders for us to be able for us to listen and to really evaluate and see how we can, you know, move forward. And I know that you don't have this illusion that is going to change in our lifetime. Like we're talking about setting the lifetimes from now on, but it has to start somewhere. And I think you guys have taken the mantle and actually starting with that. So I'm proud of you guys and thank you. And if there's anything I can do, please let me know. And guys, please, if you're watching this, please share this with other people, because I think more and more people need to hear stories like this, and more people need to understand it from conversation like this to open up their mind and see where we're heading. So thank you guys. I really appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
And
Yeah,
I'll
you're
share the
welcome.
links in the comments below, and so they can find out and connect with them. Okay, thank you.